In the fall of 2022, I'd just moved to Austin for a new job. I didn't know many people, and between work and settling in, dating felt like an easy way to meet someone. That's how I found Ethan on Tinder. He was charming, funny, and seemed completely normal. His pictures were casual, one at a music festival, one hiking, another with his dog. We started talking, and he was incredibly attentive. He responded almost instantly, remembered little details I had mentioned about my life, and even joked that he felt like he already knew me. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Looking back, I wish I'd seen it for what it was. We agreed to meet up for dinner at a small, quiet restaurant downtown. He insisted on picking me up, but I declined, saying I'd meet him there. He seemed disappointed, but didn't push it. The night of the date, I arrived a little early, scanning the room for him. That's when I noticed something strange. A man at the bar was watching me, not in a casual way, but intensely. He was well-dressed, mid-40s, completely unfamiliar. His gaze never left me, even when I shifted uncomfortably. I told myself it was nothing, just a creepy guy at a bar. Then Ethan walked in. He was exactly like his photos, tall, confident and smiling. But the moment he saw the man at the bar, his expression changed, just for a split second. Then he smiled again, walking straight toward me. Dinner was fine, mostly. Ethan was charming, but too focused on me. He barely ate, barely looked away. He asked a lot of questions, almost like that he was memorizing details about my life. At one point, I excused myself to the bathroom. When I came back, the man from the bar was gone. I let it go. Maybe it had just been a coincidence. After dinner, Ethan offered to walk me to my car. I was hesitant, but agreed, figuring it was safe in a busy area. As we walked, I felt something off, like we were being watched. I kept glancing around, but saw nothing. Then Ethan asked something strange. "How long have you lived alone?" I never told him I lived alone. I laughed it off, saying I had roommates. His smile faltered just for a second. Then he nodded. He walked me to my car, leaned in like he was going to kiss me. But I stepped back. He seemed disappointed, but smiled anyway. I got in, locked the doors, and watched him walk away before driving off. That should have been the end of it. That night I woke up to my phone buzzing, a text from an unknown number. "You look beautiful tonight." My stomach dropped. I replied, asking who it was. No response. Then another message. "Did you make it home safe?" Ethan already had my number saved. This wasn't him. Panic set in. I checked my locks, looked out the window, but the street was empty. I told myself it was just a prank, maybe a wrong number. Then another message came. "You should be more careful about who you trust." I barely slept. The next morning, I checked Ethan's Tinder profile. Gone. I texted him, asking if everything was okay. The message never delivered. His number was disconnected. I called the restaurant, asking if they had security footage of the bar. They hesitated, but eventually agreed to let me see it. And what I saw made my blood run cold. The man at the bar, he had been watching Ethan, not me. Every time Ethan looked away, the man pulled out his phone. He was taking notes. I felt sick. I asked the restaurant manager if they had any idea who he was. He frowned and said the man had been there before I arrived. He had been waiting. I left, my mind racing. That night, I blocked the unknown number and told myself it was over. Then, around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new number. A single message. "He wasn't who he said he was. I was trying to keep you safe, but now he's watching me." I moved out of Austin a month later. I never heard from Ethan again, but sometimes I wonder, who was the man at the bar? And more importantly, who was Ethan? In the spring of 2023, I was new to Los Angeles and thought dating would be a good way to meet people. After a few awkward matches, I swiped right on Nathan. He seemed normal, cute, well-spoken, a bit shy, but in a way that felt genuine. He said he worked in real estate and had just bought his first home. He even joked that if our date went well, maybe he'd give me a tour. We decided to meet for drinks at a rooftop bar downtown. The date was nice, mostly. Nathan was polite but quiet, and I found myself doing most of the talking. He barely touched his drink, but his eyes never left me. There was something intense about the way he listened, as if memorizing every word. At some point, he casually mentioned that his house was nearby and asked if I wanted to see it. I hesitated, but he reassured me it was only a few blocks away, just a quick look. He was so mild-mannered that I didn't feel unsafe. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We walked through a quiet residential neighborhood, the houses large and modern. Nathan led me up the driveway of a sleek, dark house at the very end of the street. There were no cars parked outside, no lights on. He unlocked the door and stepped aside for me to enter. The house was empty. No furniture, no signs of anyone living there, just bare walls and an unsettling silence. My gut twisted, but I forced a smile. "So, you just moved in?" I tried to make a joke about his minimalistic style, but he didn't laugh. He just stood there, watching me. He motioned for me to follow him toward the back of the house, saying he wanted to show me something cool. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I didn't want to overreact. I followed him down a hallway, past darkened rooms, until we reached a door. He opened it, revealing a staircase leading down. A basement. I stopped. Every nerve in my body told me not to go down there. Nathan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Come on. It's the best part." I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Maybe next time," I said, already backing away. His expression didn't change. He just stared. The silence between us stretched too long. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, maybe next time." I turned quickly, pretending to check my phone, and walked toward the front door, forcing my steps to stay calm. When I reached the door, I realized something. It was locked. I kept my voice steady as I asked him to unlock it. He walked over slowly, watching me the whole time, then flipped the deadbolt. The second I was outside, I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the well-lit streets of downtown. My hands were shaking as I called a rideshare and got home as fast as I could. That night I deleted Tinder. The next morning I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I decided to look up the house. Maybe Nathan really was just moving in. Maybe I had overreacted. I searched for recently sold properties in that neighborhood. Nothing. No houses had been purchased on that street in years. My stomach dropped. I checked property records and finally found the house. It had been vacant for over a decade. No owner, no tenants, no Nathan. I sat there, my blood running cold, staring at the screen. If Nathan didn't own that house, then what was he planning to do with me inside it? A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You should have gone downstairs." I moved out of LA 2 months later. I never heard from Nathan again, but sometimes when I'm home alone at night, I think about that dark house at the end of the street, and I wonder what was waiting for me in the basement. Yeah, in the summer of 2023, I'd been on Tinder for a while, mostly swiping for fun. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but when I matched with Chris, something felt different. He was handsome, but not in a flashy way, just an ordinary guy with warm eyes and a laid-back smile. His profile said he loved hiking and photography, and we clicked instantly. Our conversations felt easy, like we had known each other forever. After a week of texting, Chris suggested we meet in person. He wanted to take me to his favorite hiking spot just outside of Seattle. I hesitated. Meeting someone in the middle of the woods wasn't exactly my idea of safe, but he reassured me it was a well-traveled trail. He even sent me a photo of the view at the top. Absolutely breathtaking. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in the parking lot at the base of the trail. Chris looked just like his pictures, tall, lean, dark hair, and a friendly smile, but something about him felt off in person. He was polite, but there was a slight awkwardness, like he was studying me rather than just talking. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just nervous. The hike started fine. The trail was busy, full of couples, families, and joggers. I felt safe enough. Chris led the way, pointing out different plants and talking about how he used to come here all the time. I started to relax. Then, about an hour in, the crowds thinned out. The trees became denser and the sounds of people faded. I checked my phone. No signal. That uneasy feeling crept back in. Chris must have noticed because he smiled and said, "Don't worry, we're almost there." We reached a small clearing and I stopped to catch my breath. Chris stepped ahead and pulled out his phone. He told me he wanted to take a picture of us together. I laughed and agreed. He held up his phone, snapped a few shots, then said he was going to send them to me. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. I opened the message, and my stomach dropped. The photos were there, but I was alone. Chris wasn't in them. The background was the same, the angle was perfect, but where he should have been standing, there was nothing, just empty space. I felt cold all over. My breath came in short gasps as I looked up at him. He was staring at me, expressionless, still holding his phone. I forced a laugh, trying to act normal. "That's weird," I said, showing him the photo. He barely glanced at it. "Yeah," he murmured. "Weird." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Something was wrong. My hands were shaking as I slipped my phone back into my pocket. I needed to get out of there. I told him I was feeling lightheaded from the hike and needed to head back. Chris didn't argue. He just smiled. I turned and started walking quickly down the trail. I could hear his footsteps behind me, unhurried, steady. My pulse raced. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to keep my pace normal. Then, after a few minutes, I realized something. I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. I glanced over my shoulder. Chris was gone. I spun around, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The trail was empty, completely silent. I called his name, but there was no response, just the rustling of trees. I pulled out my phone to check the time, 3:07 p.m. Then I looked at the message he had sent me. The timestamp on the photo said 3:12 p.m. My vision blurred with panic. I had received the photo 5 minutes before it was even taken. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back to the parking lot, but when I did, my car was the only one there. I locked the doors, started the engine, and sped out of there, hands shaking on the wheel. That night I searched for Chris's Tinder profile. It was gone. I reverse searched the pictures he had used. They belonged to a man who had been missing for 3 years. A man who had vanished on that same trail. I don't go hiking anymore. But sometimes when I scroll through my photos, I find new ones. Pictures of me, standing alone in the woods. Some matches should never be made. If these stories sent chills down your spine like this video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more terrifying true horror stories. And don't forget to hit the bell icon. Because sometimes the scariest part of online dating is who's really on the other side.